You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Well, I think when you're doing big movies like The Dawn of the Dead or any of these larger films that I've worked on, it's logistics. You know, your job as a first AD is to, basically work the schedule, take the script and break it down, and then work a schedule out with the producers and say, how many days do we have to shoot this? 40, 50, 60, whatever it is.
Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button for another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before I get to the interview with Peter Marshall, I just want to take the time and say thank you to everyone who has continued to support the podcast by subscribing either on iTunes or Podbean, and especially those who share the podcast on Twitter and Facebook. So I'd like to take the time out right now to thank Michelle the Trainer, John Mazalowski, Skip Bolton, and Brandon Fowler. These are some of the people that I've always see every week, always sharing the podcast in some capacity. So if you continue to share the podcast and I ever don't mention you, please feel free to send me a tweet or an email, and I'll make sure to thank you personally, like I just did with those people, because I just want to say, I'm expressing a lot of gratitude here for everyone that's helping me along the way. Now, for what I'm doing personally in my as far as projects go, I just started a course called 30 Stories in 30 Days. It's actually taught by by a professor named Chris DeWin, and Chris was actually going to be on the podcast, and then we decided it actually would be better if he was on the podcast after the class was over. So the crux of the class is, for 30 days, I will create a new story each day, and then by the end have 30 stories to choose from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the best stories that I possibly can make, and I'm going to combine this into a Kindle ebook, and I'm going to just publish it, and it'll probably be about $3.99. I've learned a lot about Kindle pricing, and apparently if you put anything below $2.99 or something like that, the Kindle actually, or Amazon, takes most of the money, and you get like 30%, and then after taxes it equals out to be like 30 cents a book or whatever. So I'm going to price around $3.99. You're going to have the absolute best stories that I write during this time, and from there I'm going to continue working into my next project, which I am sure some of you have heard me talk about, which is a graphic novel. I still obviously do film projects as well. This is just me focusing on writing, and I've always wanted to make a graphic novel. I've always wanted to make a Kindle ebook, and I think this is the perfect time to do it. So for all of those asking me, yes, I am still doing film projects. I still do film scripts. There's nothing has changed. I'm just doing this, because I want to, and I think it's the right time for me to do these projects. So again, everyone, if you want to support the podcast, besides subscribing, please, use my Amazon link. Purchase any of the affiliate links that are listed below in the page notes. And again, I just want to say thank you very much, everyone. And without further ado, here's episode 71 with Peter Marshall. The man is a DP in Canada, and he has worked with some of the biggest people in Hollywood, including John Woo. And we're going to talk a lot about John Woo and what he learned from him. And we're going to talk a lot about all the other projects Peter makes. Actually, Peter right now is in China teaching a film course right now. So thanks again, and here it is, episode 71 with Peter D. Marshall. Thanks again for hitting that play button. It's another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Joining me today is Peter D. Marshall. Peter is a filmmaker from Vancouver, Canada. He has worked in the film and television industry for over 40 years as a film director, television producer, first assistant director, and TV series creative consultant. Peter, how's everything in Vancouver today?
It's great today. It's nice and sunny here. It's summertime, and it's a beautiful, beautiful time. We've had a lot of wildfires happening over the last week, but we had a little rain a little while ago, and that certainly helped. So it's not smoky anymore, so that's good.
Yeah, that's very good. I've actually been to Canada about 4 or 5 times, but unfortunately, it's all been in the east. I've never made my way to Vancouver. I've been to Toronto area about every single time.
Well, you've got to have a chance. You've got to get out here. Get out to Vancouver in the west. It's one of the most beautiful cities in the world when it's not raining, and take a trip down to Seattle while you're at it. So there you go. It's awesome.
Yeah, I will definitely have to do that. And speaking of Seattle, I will have to see it because I just read in 50 years, apparently there's going to be an earthquake that is going to cut the city in half and destroy almost all of it.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of trepidation about that in Vancouver, all the way down to Seattle and Portland and through the Cascadias. So it's always been a threat. But we got to keep going.
That's right. And I promise everyone, we're not going to talk about earthquakes the whole time.
No, there you go. That's good. I appreciate that. Just like we in Vancouver won't talk about all the snowstorms you get in the winter.
So Peter, you've been around the industry for 40 years. So I just to start off, and this is a question I ask everybody is, about what exactly, is your background and how did you get started in the film and TV industry?
Well, very simply, I raised in a little city called Regina in Saskatchewan, in the middle of Canada, and I was about 16, and I was bored one summer, and my father gave me the home movie camera. He said, "Here, just go, give me a roll of film." He said, "Go do something." And I put a roll of film through the camera, and here I am today. I got interested in filmmaking very young. Ended up making a lot of little movies with my friends. I ended up going to Ryerson, for a 3-year film program in the 70s, and got out and started making films and documentaries and industrials at that point. And then moved to Vancouver in the early 80s and started working on a lot of the dramas as an assistant director. And that's sort of how I got my main background. I was in the right place at the right time. And, Stephen J. Cannell came up, so I started working on shows like Stingray and Wise Guy and 21 Jump Street and all those shows up here as a first assistant director. And then I got a gig directing the shows. And then then the features were up here, and I was first AD on some fairly large movies. So over my career, especially those 20 years in Vancouver back and forth, it was basically first AD on sort of movies and then directing television. And that's sort of how it went. And it's been the last 10 years I've basically dedicated myself to education and teaching and coaching, and that's sort of where I am today. So that's sort of how I got to where I am. I do a lot of online work as well, webinars, have my online courses I teach. I travel around the world teaching workshops, and I'm also a directing instructor for the Vancouver Film School, and so it keeps me busy.
So, Peter, I have to ask, is teaching something that you've always wanted to do, or is that something that you found that you just, really enjoy doing?
I think it's something I found and enjoyed as I went through, because you're always mentoring. And I had mentors when I was, out of film school. And one person in particular, he was a commercial producer director, and I was a PA. And he would mentor me through the process, and he would be very helpful. And when I had to move from Toronto, this was in Toronto, and I actually moved to Calgary at that time, and I said, "What can I do to repay you?" And he said, "Just pass it on." And I think that's just something that I've been doing, is just passing it on. And you do that on the sets all the time. You're always mentoring whoever's coming up. But I just found that people were asking me to start teaching them things, and I was doing it and just really enjoyed it and loved it. And I think that that's something that's important, that we need to keep going, and that it's the generation that always comes before and needs to teach us, and not just film, anything, life, right? So I think that's all part of the process.
I was just reading a book called The Art of the Sound Check, and it's about an audio engineer. And the reason I bring that up is because a lot of what you were mentioning just now, that he also talks about that. And basically, whenever he would get a new job, he would immediately, seek to meet everybody and then just try to teach them everything that he knows. So it's sort of like this very collaborative effort. It's a very, that way everyone feels like they're actually on the team, and it's not just sort of, the lone man standing, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, and we're talking about a business that's very collaborative, and that I guess maybe we say you can't do a movie on your own, when I guess technically now it is possible, but you still need actors, you still need other people to help you. And I'm not talking about someone just taking their camera and doing everything on their own, but it's collaborative, and you have to be able to know how to get along with people. And it is a team effort that puts a film together. And I think that's important, so that as you do go through, people are coming up, and if you can give them some tips and hints and how to do something from all the bruises that you've earned and along the way, and hopefully then that they don't have to have that. They'll earn their own bruises, but at least you can help them along the way. And I certainly find that with teaching, it's very, very gratifying when light bulbs go off. And because it's a very international world, I'm very fortunate that, say, at the Vancouver Film School, that they're international classes. So you get a class, you get classes with lots of people in them, lots of students, and they're all from around the world. So it's like culturally, language, but at the same point, we know we speak film. And I'm off to China again, actually, in about a week to teach again in Shanghai for 3 months at the Shanghai Vancouver Film School. That's my second tour over there. And I'm in China, but we speak film, and it's a pretty amazing process.
So when you go over to China, Peter, do you actually speak Mandarin, or is there like an English interpreter? No, everything in the campus, we teach everything in English. So the students have to have English when they come in. I mean, everything around there is all in Chinese, obviously. We learn our expressions, and how to order food is always important. But Shanghai is a very modern city, obviously. But everything we teach is in English. The thing is that they have an option when they go out, they can shoot in Chinese and Mandarin. So standing on the sets is always interesting when they're blocking scenes in Chinese or shooting. Yet I can understand I missed the jokes. I think that was probably the hardest thing to do. But you understand what they're doing, and you nod your head sometimes. You go, yeah, that you're doing the right thing, and they look at you, and I go, because we understand, and because we know what's happening, and it's not that difficult actually. And that's very cool. And I know Chinese. I know English is taught a lot in China. I've had Chinese professors come and visit me. I took 2 years of Chinese in college. Wow. And I remember the Chinese professors, when they came over, came over from all over China. They would actually talk about everybody learns English over there. They said when they see, anyone who even looks either European, or American, they may have a shot of speaking English, they're going to try it out on an actual person who speaks it. So I'm guessing that, you might get that a lot over there. Well, again, like I said, this is my second trip. I was over there for 2 months, December, January. And you're right, you're walking down the street and someone will just walk up to you and start speaking, and you have a conversation, and then they just walk away. It's a very fascinating process. Oh, and ni hao ma? Hen hao. There you go. So it's a very interesting process, and I've taught in various countries around the world as well. Been in Singapore a couple times, Dubai, Haiti. Haiti was interesting because I had to everything had to be translated with an interpreter into Creole. So that was interesting conversations that you go and everybody has rudimentary English, but basically I would speak in English, and then the interpreter would interpret it into Creole, and then between French and English and Creole, we'd all have a great conversation. So, and I think that's the charm of it too, right? It's just like when you do meet people from around the world, or you travel, or people come over and see you, what's the common denominator? It's storytelling, and I think that's what we want to do. Yeah, and I think that is an excellent point. As you've seen, many foreign films over here in North America, we can see how some of these cultural and these things just sort of translate very well. And sometimes you don't even need subtitles or anything. You can just tell by the actors' movements, what they're conveying. And it's sort of like that experiment that someone once told me was, if you really enjoy a movie, watch it with no audio and just see if you can still piece it together.
Right. I mean, I think that's a good trademark of watching a good film, because we're visual. I think that when you sit and watch television like that, you would be lost because it's all talk. And I do that a lot on the airplanes. I travel a lot, and if there is a movie or a movie in your computer in front of you, it's try watching it without. Without the sound, and see if you get the idea, see if you get the story, or is most of the story. You're going to miss, obviously, character things, but it's a good test. And I think that, filmmaking is a visual medium, is about storytelling in a visual sense. And that what we do is we have scripts as directors, and we translate that now visually. How do we tell the story? And I think, as most directors probably do, is, do we really need to say this? Why can't we show this?
Yeah, and very true, and something that I've learned from and I also I took your course, which is the Film Director Prepares, and a lot of what you talk about, which is something I want to get into too in a second, is just directing actors, and I think that, to me, something I've learned is that there's different styles of directors. Some are more visual, some maybe are more of a writer sense, and then some sort of like almost the James Cameron type. But I think one thing that I think most beginning directors forget is they worry about camera placement, they worry about this. They seem to forget that they have to direct these actors.
Yes.
And when you're directing these courses, what are some of the things that maybe you give, tips that you give, or even what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see filmmakers making when directing actors?
Well, I'm going to back up just a little bit on that. I think the mantra I have, as a filmmaker, is essentially story, performance, and cinematics, and that's the three. And it all starts with story. And I don't think there's anybody in the business, whether you're a director, producer, a stunt coordinator, a visual effects coordinator, whatever, they're always going to say, what's the story? How do we help the story? So it's the story first. It's your script, your ideas, your story. That's the number one thing you have to work on, story. We go to movies to see the story. The second is performance. It's about the actors. It's about the actors translating the script with you as the director to tell the story. So the second thing is working with the actors. And then the third is cinematics. And I guess that's just, for me, a general term of everything else. Costumes, special effects, lenses, cinematography, lighting, sound, all the other mostly technical things that happen. And if you think of story, performance, and cinematics in that order, that's the best way to approach your filmmaking style. And I think that when you start speaking about how to direct actors, you have to go all the way back to your prep, because it starts there. And the number one thing that actors are looking for with the director is trust. And they need to be able to trust you. And that starts with, do you understand the story? Do you understand the scene that you're doing? Do you understand everything about the scene and the story? So you really go back to your script analysis. I do a lot of coaching online, Skype around the world, and in film students at school, etc. And the first thing I always ask anybody who brings in a film is, what's your theme? That's that underlying story, subtext, the meaning, if you will, of what the story is, what I call really about. What's your story really about? And you have to hone in on that as a director. Again, this comes from producer, directors, writers. It's like, what's the theme? Is it love everlasting? What is it? There's a million themes. And you have to figure out what that is, because you're going to be guiding your ship as a director based on what that theme is. And if you don't know what the theme is, you're going to get lost, because a lot of everything we talk about is divided into text and subtext. The text is the script, the words that are spoken, that's the text. And it's the subtext world where the director and the actors work. It's what the real meaning's underneath. It's what's really going on. And so from a director's point of view, you need to work through the subtext and the theme and the subworld, where most inexperienced directors or young filmmakers, they'll just look at the text and go, these are the words I have to say, and I want to have a cool shot, and all of these kind of things like you're saying. And this is pretty traditional because there's so much you have to understand and know about filmmaking that the surface part is not easy, but that's the first thing you see, right? So obviously, there's a location, there's a camera, working the actors around on the set to get the text and just get the words out. And you see that in a lot of bad movies. You see that in a lot of, I'm not going to say bad television, I'm saying television is a different animal where it's just so much talk, that you have to really approach it from that concept first, which is the theme, and then all your script analysis. And script analysis is big.
And you're right. Script analysis is very big. And one thing that I've learned is when you finally are able to get all the actors together, like all your principal actors, and actually work through just see them run through a rehearsal, no matter how rough it is an infinite time saver. I have found and been able to work out problems that I didn't even think about if it had not been for that rehearsal. Mm-hmm. So, have you found that out too? Where is that something you talk about in your seminars?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if to get to the acting part, to get to the shots part, to figure out why you're going to use this lens and put the camera up high or low, goes still all the way back to your theme. It goes back to your script analysis, so that when you start with your script and you work through it, it's all about your scene objectives and your character objectives, all your scene beats. Just take each scene apart, and then you get to know the story. You get to know it intimately, because scene beats and character objectives are going to help you understand why characters move on the set. So you have to start there. This is a business of threes. Everything is threes. 3 words, 3 words. So another 3 words I have about directing actors is motivation determines behavior, and that happens all the time. Motivation determines behavior. If you're hungry, you're motivated to go get something to eat. We do it every single day. And I think from an actor's point of view, the behavior of why am I doing this? Why would my character say this? Why would I move over here? It's all motivated by something deeper, which is the subtext, a lot of it. And the text, of course, is that you have to go and get the gun to pull it out of the drawer, etc. These all have to be the reasons. And then I think as you go through your script analysis in depth, then you get into the casting process. And it's really in the casting process that you start to build the trust with the actors. Even at some point, you don't even know if you're going to be working with them. And when you're in the casting session, there's essentially there's lots of things you need to look for when you're casting actors. But essentially, here's the top 3. It's, do they look the part? Can they take direction? And do they have range? And you need to find all that out within 5-10 minutes. And that's the starting point in how you do that. And the reason I'm talking about this before I get into actually answering your question on set is you need to set the base for everything first. And it's about giving them, as they come into the room, they'll, they do their first part of this, they do their scene, they do their first read, and you give them an adjustment and you switch it. You give them a different idea or verb or objective to change it around. You want to see if they have range and if they can take direction. Because if the actor then does the same thing over again after your note, then you think, well, they didn't either listen to me or they can't do anything more than that. Is that what I need as an actor? And you go through all this process of audition and several callbacks and into rehearsal stage, which leads you into what you're just saying, Once you've cast, you're into rehearsal stage, and rehearsals are gold. Actors, almost every actor would want a rehearsal, as long as the director understands what real rehearsals are about. And that if you're a director, it gets you an opportunity without 20 or 30 or 60 people standing around on set to work things out. So rehearsals are incredibly important. Script read-throughs, after casting, you want to do a script read-through first. To walk through the script, have actors bring in ideas, ask questions, etc. And then when you get into the rehearsal stage, it's not like theater where they can get 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of rehearsal. You're lucky maybe to get a couple hours, maybe a day or two. But anytime you can get a rehearsal with the actors is incredibly important, because that gets you on the same page as them with their objectives, with scene blocking, script changes for dialogue, etc., that don't have to happen on the set where it's very expensive to do things like that.
Yes, and that is something I've learned too, because I was during those rehearsals, I was able to take a plethora of notes and literally, and also do some ideas of blocking, do some more ideas, and it's always interesting to see too what an actor, when they read the script for maybe the first time and then the second and third time, what they start pulling from the script, and then they start making their own acting choices, and then like you said before, it's such a collaborative effort if filmmaking and TV, that when it finally that's when you have to start actually figuring out what is going on here. The director has to actually figure out what this scene is about and figure out how am I going to direct this to my vision.
Mm-hmm. And I think I use the word organic a lot, is that in order to get believable performances, the actors need to be, in a lot of terminology, need to be in the moment, but also very organic. In other words, that they have to repeat the same lines over and over again. Could be 5, 10, 25 times if you're doing 5 camera angles and 2 to 3 takes each. They're going to know everything. So by having it organic, by in the moment, every take can be slightly different. And I think as a director, that's what you want. And then you have choices in editing room to build the characters, because there's nothing, that just doesn't sort of sell right when actors are just anticipating to say the next line. And you can see that on sort of movies that are pretty fast or not very good, or performances that are not really believable. They're just actors saying lines, and they don't mean them. It's not believable. So a lot of those things that, in order to get there, come from, I go all the way back to your script analysis, understanding your theme, understanding your beats, and all of those things all the way up into on the set. And like you said, rehearsal is the time where you can take notes, that you can get on the same page with the actors. And and it's important for a director. I call it take the blinders off. I think in the old days before the automobiles, we had the horses and the wagons on the streets, and they had blinders on, which means they could only look in one direction, so they weren't distracted by what was going on either side of them. That's where that term comes from. I tell students, take your blinders off, take that off, and look around. Who says that your idea is the right one? An actor comes in, they're going to do something different. How do you do that? Open yourself up and allow the story to develop in front of you with the actors. If you've cast well, your story, and everyone's on the same page, then you're bringing the actors, just like you said, Dave, you're bringing them in to collaborate with you by saying, here's an idea. Let me try this. You can say yes, no. You can try it. You can do a couple different takes. You have options in the editing room to change or add or subtract. It is really key from a director's point of view of your key area of working with those actors on the set. And it starts with the script analysis. I'm going to say this over and over again because I want everybody to get that. And in your casting session.
You touched upon a very a phrase that I've come to know and love, and that is, let's try it this way. And somebody once told me at a directing seminar that is, if you actually can, that is the phrase to use for actors, just to even try it, just to try something completely new, or just to sort of, if you're just. You know what I mean? Just to get everyone on the same page, and it's just sort of just to try to convey something is, let's try it this way. Let's try a little, faster, slower, angrier, happier, something like that. But it's I'm just glad you brought that up, because that was something I was going to mention to you as well. If you advocate that method as well.
Well, I think when we look at directing actors, what do we mean by a method of doing that? I strongly suggest everybody pick up Judith Weston's book, Directing Actors. I think it's the #1 book on directing actors, and it is certainly a Bible in that sense. And it really goes over a whole process of how to do that. And I think that's a really important thing to do. If you're coming in understanding the story you want to tell, because I think, from an actor's point of view, they also have to understand from a director's point of view that a director, either you have your own script as a writer and you find the money to do your short film or your indie movie, or you're hired by a producer. Either way, there's a story and an obligation to tell for a studio or a network or a producer or someone with the money. Who's that? What's the story? And so you're obligated as a director to say, this is the story, the genre, everything we want to tell, and the actors are going to be part of that, just like your director of photography with the lighting and your production design. Everybody's on the same team, and you guiding them. And you want to be able to say to your director of photography, here's the mood I'm after, and let them create it and show you ideas. You go to your production designer, show me, here's the mood, here's some colors, what do you think? To your composer and say, this is the kind of music I'm thinking of, show me what you think, make it better. And you will do the same thing for the actors. This is the character, let's build the character up. These are the ideas in the script. Let's try different things, because what will happen is the actors will take your story, they'll look at the scenes, and they'll start to develop their backstory, their character, where they're from, where they're going to. Scenes that are in the script will tell them backstory, and then they'll make up their own stories of who they are. And they're going to come in to the set, to the blockings, to rehearsals, totally with other ideas in mind. And as a director, the insecurity that we have is when people ask us different questions or they want to change something. If we're not prepped, if we're not prepared, that's when we start to panic. And that's when we go say, no, let's do it this way. And a lot of it is because we're insecure, or we don't know how to work with actors. And so I think that that's something that is overall, not just with actors, but with our entire crew. So again, keep it organic, keep those blinders off, and really ultimately prep yourself. Because and again, Dave, I know I'm repeating, but this is so important, is that when you know your story, when you know what everything is about, you know where the theme is and where you're driving to, you can deal with all of these situations. You can deal with actors asking questions. You can deal with, a location burning down and you have to go somewhere else because you know what's important in the story. And that's really the key, I think, the key element to everything, including working with actors.
And Peter, never worry about repeating yourself on this podcast. It's actually encouraged, because
and it's a good teaching thing. What I do, I repeat, yeah.
Because some people said, "I'm sorry, Dave. I've just gone on for too long," and I'm like, believe me, I have that effect on people. As we talk, that's a very good point, by the way, about, if you know where the story is, that way you can sort of plan. You have your contingency plans. If a location burns down, if you lose something like that, you can sort of just change the scene to, from being in an apartment building to maybe being on the street, or, even in the woods, or, just to brainstorm out loud here. But, one thing too, and I would be verbose if it mentioned this, is that magical word of subtext. Mm-hmm. And and that's sort of what I've seen some sort of veteran actors when they work with younger directors, maybe more novice directors, when they sort of bring that up, that seems to be a tripping point for some younger directors, because I don't think they're either looking for that or because again, maybe they're too concerned about shot placement or this and that. Is that something you've experienced as well? Is that some younger directors don't sort of worry about subtext when especially when working with veteran actors?
I think it's endemic. I think that I started that way. I mean, it was like, you start with the story and the text and you look at literally what the words are and then you try to translate everything. It took me a while of working to understand really and reading and like the subtext of it, what was really going on. And I think whether it's veteran actors or just any actor, that's their training comes from. They talk about the subtext, what the scene is really about. And I think that that's something that most young directors, especially when I see film students coming in or I'm talking to independent filmmakers around the world and I'm coaching, we talk about, well, the subtext. And a lot of them understand that. But it's like that is so important so that every scene, every objective has different things in it, wants and needs. So that, for example, if we talk objectives for a second with an actor, they have what we call their super objective, which is their need through the whole movie, which is their arc, if you will. So if we talk about a character, what is their arc all the way through? What is their main need? What do they need more than anything? I think Jason Bourne in the Bourne Identity in the films, his main objective in his character arc was he wanted to find his identity, right? That was his need. Okay, so that was his arc all the way through, his scene of his super objective, if you will. And so every scene he was in, and they did 3 movies, was I have to find out who I am as a person because I have amnesia. And so every scene within the film then has its own objective, his want. Okay, I need to do this to find this out. And so it becomes super objective as needs and objectives as the want, which is the text. So that once you divide it into these sort of things, you then have a better idea of dealing with the actors because you're always dealing on 2 layers, right? You're always dealing with what the script text is saying. They're coming in and they're saying, how are you? I'm fine today, et cetera, et cetera. But what's the subtext? What's really going on? Does this person actually like this person? Are they setting them up? Look at House of Cards as a prime example. That is all subtext. When Kevin Spacey talks to anybody, he's saying one thing, but darn well he's thinking a whole other thing. And there's a perfect example of subtext so that the actor plays that, the director understands that, and that's where you get the performances and you get the scenes that really ring true because all the time we go around saying things or talking to people and we're thinking maybe things. That's life, that's human behavior. And so subtext is really the world that you live in as a director, as a writer, and as an actor, is what is really going on underneath the text, because that's the difference between an actor just sort of running through lines or taking a beat in a certain spot, because that beat means something, and that really comes from subtext.
Yeah, and that's a very good point too, especially with House of Cards. How whenever Kevin Spacey is talking to somebody, he is really, again, talking about something else. And it's something from writing too. I found it is obviously you have to really worry about subtext. What this scene is really, what's really going on in this scene.
Yeah.
As we've talked about directing actors and everything else, you have sort of switched to switch gears. You've worked with a lot of very, very cool people on a lot of very, very interesting projects. Just to name some of the projects that on your IMDb, you were the first assistant director on Happy Gilmore. You were the first assistant director on Butterfly Effect, on Dawn of the Dead, which is the 2004 remake. So some really, really cool projects. And, I have to ask, Peter, as a first AD on a lot of big projects, what are some of the challenges that you face on these sets?
Well, I think when you're doing big movies like The Dawn of the Dead or any of these larger films that I've worked on, it's logistics. Your job as a first AD is to, basically work the schedule, take the script and break it down, and then work a schedule out with the producers and say, how many days do we have to shoot this? 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, and make it work. and work with the director and all of the camera and sound and makeup and hair, and work with all the elements and all the people to make sure that we can all agree on getting this done in the amount of time. And then it's sort of like a big Rubik's cube. And then on the day, it's just making sure everything goes, keeping one step ahead of the game, and having your own relationship with everybody on the set, crew, actors, producers, director, etc. I find that I spent 25 years as a first AD, and I did a lot of big movies, a lot of television movies, commercials, TV series, and it gave me the opportunity to stand beside some really, really good directors and some really, really amazing Academy Award-winning actors, and of course the opposite was true. I worked with a lot of bad directors and not very good actors and bad DPs, and I had the whole gamut, right? And so what that has given me is an opportunity to see the two sides of production coin, if you will. And really, I think making a film is actually not that difficult. Once you understand the order of how all the pieces go, I think human beings tend to make it a lot more difficult. But I think to come back and answer that question, it's about personalities as well. And this is a business of big personalities, a lot of egos. And as an assistant director or any position, a director especially too, but as an AD, you have to balance all of these relationships in order to get the days. And that's have individual relationships with the actors. As a first AD, I've had to have all these actors that are coming in. You have your one-on-one with them because you're the assistant director. They know you're the AD. You're controlling their call times. You can make a set. ADs, if they're yellers and screamers, can make a really sort of bad time. I mean, the triumvirate on a set is the director, the AD, and the director of photography. Those are the three people that control all of the sort of the attitude and pacing of a movie set. And if one of those things are off, one of those people are off, that's where sometimes you can cause problems. But it's ultimately just teamwork and it's experience. And that's why I tell film students, I tell anybody I can, I don't care who you are, what you're doing, get onto sets. There's a certain energy on a set that you can't read in a book. You can't, you learn, you have to sort of stand and watch. And I know there's a lot of directors or indie directors that I just want to do my own movies. That's fine. Go to town. I'm so proud of you to do that. But there is one thing you're missing. If you don't go on someone else's set, if you don't go to watch, if you don't work as, whatever that is, you're going to miss things. So I guess my biggest word of advice, because that's how I came up through the trenches. I was a PA on commercials. I did everything. I was grip. I was gaffer. I came into the AD department, up into, I've been producing, I've been directing, and you get to see all of the elements put together. And so that if you're going to go in as a writer, producer, director, actor, these things will all help you. So I guess it is really about human behavior, Dave. I keep going back to that no matter what it is.
And you're very right about if the director, the first AD, or the director of cinematography, if those one of those three or any of those three don't have or something is off on those, people will start to see it. I was on a project and the director of cinematography was just, I'm going to be blunt. He was just an incredible jerk. He was a jerk to everybody, his camera crew, and to the director, to the producers, and eventually, by the end, nobody wanted to even remotely be in his presence. Mm-hmm. And the problem is that sort of sent a shockwave throughout the rest of the crew.
Yeah. Oh, it's very easy to do that. And I think it's something we should look in life is sort of reverse engineer your life from your epitaph on your tombstone. What do you want on your tombstone as an epitaph, and work backwards. And I think for me, I've been most of the shows of all the 20 or so movies I worked on, et cetera, is you look back at the ones, and most you've always have good time. I think Happy Gilmore for me was what I call my 100% show, that there was not one person in front of the camera or behind the scenes that was a problem. We had a good time. It was summer in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver. We were on golf courses. We were doing a comedy. We were having a blast, and it was like you just wanted to get up in the morning and go to work. And it was an amazing experience. And I've had other shows, which shall remain nameless, that the alarm goes off, and you just don't want to go to work. You want to get fired. Anything. It's really tough, and we just get through them. That's all we can do.
Well, speaking of Happy Gilmore, I've heard nothing but great things about Adam Sandler as a human being, as a personal offset.
We had a great time. I think Happy Gilmore, was the show or the movie that actually sent Adam's career skyrocketing, I think, after that one. And yes, it is true. I've worked with a lot of big name actors and a lot of what we call set actors. Mel Gibson, Goldie Hawn, Kevin Spacey, all of these people, they just hang on set. They're with you. They're working with the crew. They understand what the crew is doing. It's not all about them. You say, hey, we're all one big team here. And Adam was certainly like that. And doing a comedy, of course, there's a lot of it. And Dennis Duggan was the director. He's a former actor, and he's done a lot of Adam's movies. There's a set of it's also fun. And so what's happening on the set is fun. And you do get other things like you're doing a zombie movie and people tearing people apart. It's okay. It's a drama. But you still try to have fun. You still try to do things. I mean, working with Zack Snyder was awesome on Dawn of the Dead. We had a great time. And I think it was one of the things that I thought was interesting, that we were shooting the movie just before, I think it was 28 Days Later came out. We all went to the movie and it was like, this is awesome because they were doing the same thing we were doing. The zombies were running fast, and that was the switch that those two movies did. And all the extras we had, you had to teach them not to walk like the normal monster. You had to run fast because that added a whole new element to the movie. And just to watch creative people work, I've been able to stand by and just watch some incredible talent, Dave, in my career. You're sitting there, you're just going, oh my God. I mean, I worked with Peter O'Toole for a week on a feature film out here, and you're just like you're standing there looking and going, that's Lawrence of Arabia. Like this, they go to a different place, and just the talent that's available, and not just actors. It's directors too, and directors of photography, and all of this, and people, and just anybody that can just costume designers that can just pull rabbits out of a hat. The whole experience of doing a movie when people are into it, they're professional, and you give them as a head of department, whether that's a director, an AD, or a props master, or a cinematographer, you give them the opportunity to shine. They're going to do it, and I think that takes the movies or their films and raises the bar and raises them up. As a good leader, that's what you need to be doing.
And that is a phenomenal way to put it, Peter. That is, I was going to ask you about Dawn of the Dead too, because I can imagine, you probably had several hundred zombie extras, and you and the Wranglers are probably, because you're telling the Wranglers, get them together, and then you having to make sure all these little pieces are in place. I imagine that there may have been some days where you're like, my God, how am I going to get this done?
Well, I think, and we had we were in a big shopping mall. They shot it in Toronto, and because there was a big shopping mall that was the half of it was going to be torn down. So we had the half that wasn't going to be torn down for a while. It was perfect timing, but there was a huge second unit on Dawn of the Dead. So a lot of the things that didn't involve the actors was second unit. So they had hundreds and hundreds of zombies and extras out. I found that when I watched the DVD of the behind the scenes, I really got the sense of, oh yeah, there is the makeup, and that's what they're doing over there, because it was a second unit director and DP and the first AD that I was dealing with that had to do the big masses. But still, you're doing a lot of working on elements and coordinating. I think the biggest thing I've ever done as an AD was I did for Ed Zwick, I came out to do the battle scene on Legends of the Fall, to coordinate that for Ed Zwick. I spent 2 weeks with the military advisor and ran the set the first night, and we had 1,000 extras going out of trenches and explosions and bombs going off, and it was amazing. I've never been involved in anything that big before. And it was a totally amazing experience to stand up on a hill and basically run a set when you say roll sound and lights go off and bombs go off, and all of a sudden you see 1,000 men charging across the field, and you've got Brad Pitt and Henry Thomas and Aidan Quinn all in the midst of it. It's quite extraordinary to be able to do that, but it starts with the knowledge you have of just working with two people in a room, or just having someone do a cross in a restaurant. It all starts there. Enable you to do the bigger things just means you've had more experience, but you start with all the little stuff. It still starts with the analysis of whatever you're doing, whether you're breaking down a script or breaking down a script as an AD. It still starts there. It's what I call situational reduction. You break everything down to its smallest element, find out what all the pieces are, and then build up from there. And we do that in life all the time. How to tie a shoe, cereal, what do you put in first? You put this in, you put this in, you put this in. So we do it all the time. And it's just, it's a great life. Love it.
And I know, Peter, we're starting to get close to the time limit. So I have to ask. You directed a couple episodes of John Woo's TV series, Once a Thief. And yes. I have to ask, did you ever have meetings with John Woo? Was he involved at all?
Well, actually, I go back further with John Woo. I actually that was 97. In 96, I actually was his first AD on his first TV movie. It was called John Woo's Once a Thief. We recreated the TV pilot, TV movie, and we shot it in Vancouver. So I actually worked with John for 2 months. And he's an amazing man. And I had never heard of John Woo before I got the call to interview. And so I started looking at some movies, and I said, I've got to work with this guy. I couldn't believe all those movies he did in Hong Kong. John and I got along famously. And then after this, the pilot was very successful. John wanted me, and the producers wanted me involved in the series in Toronto. So I became a creative consultant, producer. I worked all the time with everyone. I directed 5 of the episodes, and I was also a producer on set. So I actually went all the way through the series, and so that sort of is something I'm very proud of the show.
And that is absolutely amazing. That you got to work with John Woo. He is one of my personal favorites, and I mean, I was glad that he started to get some recognition over here, because Once a Thief is great, and and I'll be honest, Peter, I haven't seen your TV show, but Once a Thief, but I am going to check that out. I'm going to see if that's available like on Hulu or Amazon, and if it is, I'm going to link to it in the show notes as well. But there you go. But John Woo is he's phenomenal.
I had lots of great lines with John, but one of the best, we were sitting on an insert car driving around and towing motorcycle, and we had a lot of action sequences in the TV pilot. And so John and I had a lot of chance to talk. And at this point in my career, I didn't really want to do a lot of action movies and things because I could pick and choose a bit as an AD, and I was very fortunate to do that. But once I saw John's stuff, I said, I have to work with somebody like this, and it was amazing, and I had an opportunity. And so we were talking, and he asked me, well, what kind of movies do you pick and choose? And I said, well, I tend to pick movies that have more dialogue-driven than action. I've done my action because from an AD's point of view, stunts and blowing things up, it's very hard. It's a lot of hard work to coordinate and safety, etc. And so I said, I pick movies with, if you can, with a lot of dialogue-driven. I like those kind of stories. And so he paused, and he said, and so basically he said to me, if they've got too much dialogue, he doesn't want to do the movie. He wants action. So I thought that was quite opposite. It was great. So I want the ones with the dialogue. He says if there's too much dialogue, he doesn't want to do it. That is absolutely classic, and that is an amazing story. And I thank you for sharing that with me and for the listeners. It's always great to hear when you're able to work with these people, and you can just find out that there are genuinely good people. Like Mark Maron on his podcast he just got to interview Vince Gilligan, who did Breaking Bad, and he said he's always ecstatic to meet these people that he's idolized, because he always thinks that they're like these
sort of untouchable people, and he's always worried if they might be a little off, but he's thankfully said most people are actually very, very generally good and stuff like that. So it's always good to hear.
Yes.
So I know, Peter, we're going, we're just about at the end, and I wanted to ask you, just in closing, is there anything that maybe we didn't discuss, or anything we didn't say, or anything you want to say at all, that just as sort of a final thought?
Well, I think from your audience, you have independent filmmakers, and I think that's the key word right now. I think that there's everybody around the world if you're a storyteller and you're a visual storyteller, you can pick up your camera, you can shoot your movies and learn, just understand what happens. Read the script books, start working with actors. The technology is going to be there. It's getting better and better, but it's not about the cool shot. It's about the story. It's about, do you move us? And I think when I look at a movie, for me, the definition of a good film is sort of the art of visually telling a compelling story with believable characters that make us feel something. So look at your script, and does it fit that? Is it creative, artistic? Is it visual? Is it a compelling story? And do the characters move us? Because we want the audience to feel something. That could be laugh, could be horror, could be thinking about something, could be crying, whatever that is. And I think start there, and start with your story.
Excellent way to, final thought, my friend. So, Peter, where can people find you out online?
They can check me out at my website, which is actioncutprint.com. It's like a director says, actioncutprint.com. And I also have a blog called filmdirectingtips.com. That's filmdirectingtips.com. And they can find me out in both those places there.
Excellent. And I'll make sure, also everyone to link to those in the show notes, so you can always, find Peter. And again, he has online classes as well as all the workshops that he does around the world. So everyone, you can find me at davebullis.com, and Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Peter D. Marshall, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show.
Dave, it was a pleasure. Anytime.
Oh, and anytime you'd like to come back on, Peter, just please let me know. And, the door's always open, my friend. And I wish you the best.
Thank you very much. You take care, Dave.
Thank you. Do the same, Peter.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.